Hello there, and welcome to the Emirates Lounge in Auckland Airport, where I'm spending a bit of time while I'm waiting for my flight to Europe. While I was here, I took a look at the drinks open to try, and I've discovered a wonderful selection of Taylor's vintage port. So the wine I have in my glass here is the 2005 Taylor's Quinta de Vargellas, which is a single Quinta vintage port. So Taylor's historic, famous, one of the oldest port houses there is, founded in 1692 by somebody called Job Bearsley, who was an English merchant who'd come to Oporto to trade, not necessarily to make wine. But the firm that he started has stayed in family hands for 300 years now. The company got its name in 1838 through the partnership of Joseph Taylor with John Fladgate and Morgan Yeatman. Today, Taylors have some fantastic quintas throughout the Douro region and regard themselves as leaders in sustainability in the Douro as well. Their success can be gauged by the fact that today they export wine to over 100 countries, and much of their success is based on the quality of their vintage wines. Now, Quinta de Vargellas is one of the Douro's premier vineyards. It's in the Douro Superior sub-region, and its vineyards of steep schist soils are predominantly north-facing. The principal grape varieties planted here are Touriga Nacional and Touriga Francesa. However, the estate is renowned for the fact that it produces fantastic field blends. So traditional old Portuguese varieties, including Tinta Barroca, Tinta Roriz and Tinta Rao, will also be found widely throughout the vineyards. Now, the winter that preceded the 2005 vintage was cold and dry, and that was a problem because 2004 had also been a dry vintage, so the soil's water reserves weren't replenished during the winter. The growing season started late, and because of the cold and the shortage of water, everything was delayed and the vegetative cycle progressed quite slowly. It was a low vigour season that yielded small, concentrated berries. In fact, there was no rain in this part of the Douro between May the 16th and September the 6th. However, there was a dramatic change on the 6th of September when rain fell for 3 days, allowing the vines to complete the ripening process. Harvest took place in September. The notes I've seen don't give a particular date, as is traditional in the Douro, and certainly for Taylor's vintage ports. The wine was foot-trodden in open slate lagares, so with fermentation going on, quite warm temperature, this resulted in good extraction of flavour and colour without too much rough handling of the fruit. Foot treading tends to enable good extraction without the pips of the grapes being broken and releasing bitter oils into the wine. Fermentation was stopped by the addition of a neutral grape spirit, and the wine then aged in casks in the cooler environs of Vila Nova de Gaia down by the coast for 2 years prior to bottling. The wine was bottled unfiltered and has spent the subsequent years maturing in bottle. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? Seeing it here is a medium to deep black ruby colour. It doesn't seem to lose very much colour to the edge there. The wine has 20.5% alcohol according to its label, and I would guess has over 100 grams per litre of sugar, certainly thereabouts. Swirling it, not surprisingly then, it's clinging very readily to the side of the glass. The aromas are initially spirity, and then there's a rich, ripe red and black cherry, but then there's an almost confected glacé cherry note as well. There's a little bit of spiritiness. There's a hint of sort of lead pencil graphite. A little bit of spirity warmth, but also sort of sweet licorice roundness in the aromas. So let's have a taste. The palate is quite rounded and smooth. It's medium to full-bodied. There's some tannins that are coming in after the sort of really juicy red to black cherry fruit, and that juiciness is really enhanced by some excellent acidity in the wine. It's really making my mouth water. But then the slightly drying notes of the structure come in and help to provide that with some balance and stop the entire wine becoming too overly sweet. It's interesting to be tasting this after I've just tasted the Taylor's 2007 vintage port, and this has nowhere near the density and concentration. It's much more open and accessible. It's giving out rich fruit, which is tempered by notes of dried fruit. There's almost some sort of figginess in there. That's moving from the sort of the fresh red fruit note and a fig through to almost dried fig note. There are hints of raisins and sultanas on the finish. The alcohol, the sweetness, all beautifully balanced, are actually giving a lovely length to the end of the wine, which is finishing rich, smooth and rounded with a glycerol smoothness. Looking at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score, this is a wine that scored 91 out of 100, and the point of making a wine such as Quinta de Vargellas is that in a year when Taylor's didn't feel the overall quality of the wines was good enough to produce a vintage port, they still had a high quality wine from this, their top Quinta, that they wanted to put out. And yes, this is a lovely wine that is very accessible and is drinking very nicely now, and will certainly continue drinking and continue being enjoyable for the next 10 to 15 years at least, and almost certainly longer. When I went to look at the ports on display here, I was assuming that what I would find would probably be a ruby port, perhaps a reserve port, if I was lucky maybe a late bottled vintage. But to find a single Quinta vintage port was fantastic. To also find its vintage sibling was amazing. So I've had a really good experience here in the Emirates Lounge in Auckland. So I will head off and get a flight, but thank you so much for joining me. I do hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you have, do please press the like button. If you're watching these tastings and you enjoy them, it would be great if you could consider subscribing. It doesn't cost anything, and that way also you can set yourself an alert. You can be notified every time I publish a new tasting. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to pass it on to them. That would be a fantastic endorsement coming from you. I'd really appreciate that. And if you have any comments or questions about the wine, the tasting, or anything else related to that, do please pop them in the comments box below. I'd love to know what you think. So thank you again for taking the time to join me, and do please try and make some time, come and join me for another tasting in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.